Decided that?
Yeah, Lois will go first. Let's just start the class and you will go second. So, peace, salam, and shalom. Welcome back to our Interfaith Explorations with me, your host, and Dr. J. McDaniels, our teacher and moderator of the class every Wednesday. So, Interfaith Explorations is definitely a program of the Interfaith Center, and our mission is to reduce the fear and prejudice among world religions through dialogue, education, and relationship building. These classes are co sponsored by Process and Faith, and also Spirituality and Practice. We started these classes back in the fall of 2019, and thank you for staying with us. Thank you for joining us. This semester, we are working on film and faith, spirituality in and across the movies. And last Wednesday, if you remember, I introduced a book to you, and I'm going to read a little bit from it, which is called Film as Religion. And I have been reading it for the last few weeks. And this week, I specifically went to the chapter on science fictions because if you remember, we have done two science fictions movies lately. We did Avatar, which was a story of humans into another planet in search of environmental resources because we have exhausted our own. And we did Arrival, which was about the arrival of aliens on our planet. So, due to those two science fiction movies, I've been reading the chapter on science fiction, and I found it very interesting to learn that, this genre called science fiction is actually the fastest growing and the most developed genre in the history of film, especially in the last 20 years. And the big science fiction movies are actually doing the most business across the world now. And I was wondering why. So, this author gives us a theory, and he says that religion has always prophesized the future. And if you look at the science fiction movies nowadays, they actually have taken on some of that role, talking to us about our future. And he also says that it's very hard to define science fiction movies, which I have noticed too. They're not only movies with spaceships and machine guns or futuristic images of technology. Of course, there can be technology, and our anxieties in part related to the invasion of technology in our lives. But science fiction has also intertwined elements of magic, fantasy, myth, spirits, and other creatures in them. And it's really difficult to even set boundaries for this genre of science fiction now. And the author tells us that, we are so much interested and fascinated by science fiction because it offers us hopes and fears. And actually, it gives us hopes, a vision of that hopes and fears that we have for our own selves and also for our species. And that hopes and fears are projected in visions of utopia, a very perfectionist world, and also in the visions of dystopia, a very catastrophic world that might happen if human beings do not change the course. And it offers us the science fiction movies gives us those models through what we think the world is going to be if we continue like that, and what we hope the world should be if we take it as a religious prophecy. So I found that really interesting that how science fiction movies have taken the role of prophesizing our future, and I thought I would share it with you. And having said that, I want to move on to our movies of the day. We have two movies, and we'll start with Free Solo with Lois Smith. Lois, you want to take it on before we go to Dr. J. McDaniels?
Absolutely. So, the first movie that we're doing is a documentary that I chose for this class called Free Solo, and just by a showing of hands, who watched it and who had who was super anxious while watching it?
I
watched the trailer and it was super edgy.
Yeah, right on. It is definitely, I think it's definitely a movie that when I watch it, anytime I watch it, I get like my heart like starts racing just because it's so anxiety inducing. So I understand if you watch the trailer and you're like, ooh, I can't do this. So I'm gonna go ahead and share the trailer. It's probably gonna do a better job of talking about what the movie's about than I will. So let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. Sorry. Let's see. Here we go.
Does it feel different to be up there without a rope?
It's obviously like much higher consequence.
People who know a little bit about climbing, they're like, oh, he's totally safe. And then people who really know exactly what he's doing are freaked out.
I've thought about El Cap like for years, and every year I'm like, that's really scary. I'll never be content unless I at least put in the effort. El Cap is the most impressive wall on Earth.
It's 3,200 feet of sheer granite. It's the center of the rock climbing universe.
Obviously, I get interview questions about it all the time. Oh, would you like to do that? And you're like, yes, for sure.
So you have a girlfriend now, I heard.
It was awesome. Pretty much makes life better in every way.
It's really hard for me to grasp why he wants this. But if he doesn't do this stuff, he'd regret it.
Everybody who has made free soloing a big part of their life is dead now.
I haven't been injured in like 7 years. I suddenly start getting injured all the time.
What if something happens? What if I don't see him again?
I could just walk away, but it's like, I don't want to.
I've always been conflicted about shooting a film about free soloing just because it's so dangerous. It's hard to not imagine your friend falling through the frame to his death.
I think when he's free soloing, that's when he feels the most alive, most everything. How can you even think about taking that away from somebody?
No mistakes tomorrow.
I'm starting to get kind of psyched.
If you're pushing the edge, eventually you find the edge.
I can't believe you guys actually can watch.
Hey Jimmy, do you copy? Just started climbing.
Okay, so for that trailer, sorry, the video, another video started playing on my end. From the trailer, if we didn't gather it all from the trailer, what's happening is the subject of this documentary, Alex, I think his name's Alex Holnold, he's a free solo rock climber that's trying to scale this rock in Yosemite called El Capitan. Free soloing means that he climbs up this rock without ropes, without any safety net. So if he falls, he will basically die. And some of the questions that were coming to me while I was watching this documentary were, it seems that Alex, the guy that's free soloing El Capitan, has almost an obsession with this rock climbing. So much so that he is, doing this against kind of like the wishes of his girlfriend, and he's doing this thing that's extremely dangerous. And it's totally removed from others. It's just him up there. So I was kind of wondering, what practices do we have that are totally removed from others? Something we practice that might even be totally ascetic in nature, totally removed from any kind of community, that we feel very strongly about, just like Alex does about this rock climbing. And another question I had while I was watching this movie was, are there any practices that we do for ourselves that are, solely for ourselves that might actually be harmful to others, even though we're not doing anything to others? So, the subject of this documentary, he was doing this climb totally for himself. He'd been practicing this for himself for years. He had an obsession to do this climb, but as we saw in the trailer, there were so many people that are connected with him. His girlfriend, his friends, the documentary crew members that had extreme anxiety about his climb, so much so that so much anxiety can be harmful to you. Is there ever a justification for doing these practices for yourself at the expense of others? So those were the questions that were coming to mind, and I'd love to open up the discussion to everyone else.
Well, those are two great questions. And let's see what people have to say. Do you want to do the gallery? I'll do the gallery review on my part, sorry.
Right.
Yeah. So Lewis, I think the first question is an invitation to share practices in your way that resemble a bit of what he was doing. Susan, please.
I was really not going to respond to those particular questions. My first take was, why does he feel compelled to do this? So maybe it's the same thing, Matthew, that what is it that we feel compelled to do that looks crazy to other people and might put other people at risk? I'm not sure, but I was so fascinated by his family, I just really tried to figure out what would motivate someone to do something so sheerly risk-taking. I mean, just, wow. I've never seen anything like that. So thank you for picking this movie. I liked it, Matthew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know of anything dangerous. I did hear one thing dangerous this morning. A woman I know told me that she went to the Super Bowl knowing she had COVID because she figured there'd be a lot of people there with COVID.
Oh, God.
So that was a little risk-taking. That had ramifications for others.
All right. Let's not think about that
What are you
right
going to
now.
do with that, Jay?
That's crazy.
Let's not go down that road for the moment. Let's stick with those questions. Lynn, do you have something you want to say? I thought I saw your hand up. Well, there were some hands up.
That's see Sally and Priscilla.
Sally and Priscilla, sorry. Yeah, Sally?
I don't do anything dangerous. I avoid danger at all possible costs, but I do swim laps, which is totally solitary. I'm in the zone. I'm focused on my breathing, on my body, on the water. It's completely solitary. And maybe that's one reason I like it. But my primary comment is more of a spiritual one. It's not an answer to that question, but sometimes I feel I go through life as though I'm solo on that wall without realizing that I have faith as support to pull me through. I have people who are behind me and want to help me. And to me, that's the spiritual message of the film, is that we're not really solo on the wall of life.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you, Sally. And there was somebody else that I think had a comment.
Go ahead, Priscilla.
Priscilla.
There are two things about the film. I don't think I can't think of any personal habits that would go to the question at hand, but there were two things about the film that I was most interested in. One is the MRI of his brain and the function of the amygdala in our emotions, and that his needed such stimulation for him to feel something. And his fear quotient was way down, which helped him do this. But the other thing was, it was such a very Zen attitude toward life. He was so connected to the earth. He was so focused in what he did. And yet he tried to be honest in his relationships. And I thought he was just kind of a fascinating and wonderful human being in that he could be so focused, want to be good to other people, but had to be honest with them. And I think it's almost selfish of us to think that he was being selfish. I don't know, but I'm be glad to hear other people's take.
I love that observation, Priscilla. That's awesome.
I do too.
Anybody else? I think Priscilla raises a great question. Is it sometimes selfish of us to think that other people are selfish in pursuing a passion?
This, Jerry, I kind of related to the mother. Having children, you know, they start crawling, they start walking, they ride a bike, they drive a car, they get married, they have children. I'm not sure that totally climbing El Capitan, but there are anxieties around observing life being developed by your offspring. And I thought his mother encapsulated the kind of parental confidence you have in your children living. And, you know, they take risk, they accept the risk, you accept their risk. And I think El Capitan may be some, you know, ultimate challenge, but to me, it just kind of talked about the evolution of parenting, which is something I wouldn't have thought of without that mother's comment.
Thanks, Jerry. Thank you. More thoughts or comments?
Well, I would like to say that there is a verse in the Bible. It's the Message Bible that was just on my mind so much this weekend after watching that movie. And it's in Psalms 46, talking about standing on the cliff's edge, standing fearless on the cliff's edge of doom, and that is a sacred haunt of the Most High God with us. And my courage would be just working through the small places in my own life where I have fear, and that takes courage. And to just be there with that, and to it's almost like standing on the cliff's edge sometimes, and to work through that place.
So Sophia and I had a chat this weekend, and I mentioned to her, Darlene, this is related to what you're saying. There was a very famous philosopher of religion named Rudolf Otto that lived in the early part of the 20th century. And he was fascinated by the question of what is it like to experience something as holy? And think holy mountains, holy places. Don't just think of God here. Think of an object that can be experienced as holy. And he suggested it has two qualities, and they're in conflict with one another. In the first case, when you see something holy or in the presence of something holy, you're drawn to it, you're attracted to it, you're pulled toward it. But at exactly the same time, there's an element of danger, maybe sometimes even terror. So it would be like standing on the edge of a cliff, and part of you thinks, I'd like to jump in. But part of you thinks, I better step away. And you experience both emotions at the same time. And his suggestion is that's at the heart of the experience of the holy. And even when you think of God, God's a little scary. God's also fascinating.
Yeah.
You experience those emotions. So I'd like to ask, have any of you, can you think of something in your life that's a little bit like the mountain, but that you're both drawn to, but it also has an element of danger, a little afraid of, at the same time?
Karen's got her hand up.
Hi, Jay. I'd like to speak to 2 points. One that you made about the experience of the holy. Several of us in past semesters have talked about epiphanies or out-of-body experiences or other ways we've experienced the holy. And I think those are, I mean, what Rudolph Otto says is exactly right. I want to stay, I want to run. I want to go further, I want to go back. What is this? I don't know what this is. It should be scary, but it's appealing, kind of the whole thing there. The other thing on a broader note is the idea of what takes us away, where our passions take us into time and space away from everything else. I have 2 professional artists in my family, and they go into a zone and with great joy and openness and creativity just are immersed in their art. And from the outside looking in, that feels this in a lot of ways the same as adventuring on a cliff. It can be an art, a passion, of something that takes us into another realm.
Jay, you're muted.
You're muted, Jay. Yeah.
But you knew what I wanted to say. Anybody else on this question of, do you have in your life an experience of the holy and or being in the zone like Carmen just described? Anybody want to share? Does anyone have in them, if you want to share, raise your hand and I'll sure call on you or somebody will, but if not, how about the element of danger? Is there anything in you that is drawn at some level in some way to the enjoyment of danger? Okay. Linda's unequivocally no. This may be the question, who likes amusement rides?
I think at a certain stage in my life, that was a amusement ride kind of thriller. But I certainly know that zone that Carmen was speaking about. But I think it's different for me than this film, which took his own life so casually. Like, being in that zone somehow affirms my oneness with the creator. And I suppose being out in nature and at the top of your game makes you feel empowered in some sense, but it was baffling to me because there's such a strong commandment to respect life, and to risk life so casually felt strange to me. It was a very strange feeling. Why challenge life itself when my experience of the holy is life enhancing. and not life challenging in that way. And so that was I felt very disturbed by the film.
And Jay, this is Jerry again. I had a kind of a parallel, excuse me, I had a parallel issue about going off the high dive, which was a personal challenge. But when I did it, I felt accomplished. And I also have the honor of having Adams as the last name. So alphabetical order was typically my challenge, you know, get up in front of the class and recite Joyce Kilmer's Trees as it blazoned me with the paranoia of alphabetical order. But I do think having a challenge that could be risky, getting over that, and all of a sudden accepting that you've either matured on that challenge or failed on that challenge. I'm not sure he took this that casually. I think this was almost a religion that he had from kind of a journey inward, per se. But
Priscilla, I saw you had your hand up too.
Well, I agree with Jerry. I did not feel that he took his life or death at all casually. If he had done that, he would have just not planned very well. He would not have practiced. I think he took his goal very seriously. He did accept death, a possibility. I think that's something we all should accept in life, that it is going to happen at some point. But to be able to live fully until you die, I admired him for doing that. I really do. So.
I'm so sorry. I think it was Sheila and then Karen after that.
Thanks. I had lowered my hand after raising it just because I was everybody was saying what I had to say. The one time though that I think of very strongly that I faced danger and also did something that I know that put my family in sort of a hardship was not only getting married for the third time, but getting married to a truck driver who took me out on the road in a truck. I had been a librarian, all of my career, and very sort of sheltered and in this lovely sort of protection that kind of environment gives you. And but it ended up being wonderful and being really such a enriching experience for me that that it turned out just like this guy's experience turned out. But there is a lot of danger in being out on the road, leaving your whole social network behind. Because even though I had my husband, he was the only person I had out there, and I had quite a large community of people before that. So, but I really admire people who do take those kinds of risks, because it just broadens your view of the whole world. To get yourself out of your little, cocoon and go out and do something completely that you know nothing about. I mean, I knew nothing about life on the road, and it all worked out, and so did the marriage. So
All right.
I'm a big risk. Well, not a big risk taker, but it was the first real. Where I was really aware that I was taking a huge risk, and thankfully I'm here to talk about it.
Thanks, Sheila. Maybe one last remark, and was there a last remark?
We have Carmen waiting for that.
Carmen, sorry, yeah.
Well, Sheila said a lot of this, and that it's not just the physical risk, it's the risks we take in our lives, financially, educationally, in grabbing a marriage that may or may not work for many reasons. How do we follow our careers? What do we do with our families while we're doing that? What do we give up? And what do we risk when we turn off so many things to follow a passion? And what God do we follow? What God do we rely on? How do we endure our passion and the risks and the sacrifices? So that's it.
Thanks, Carmen. I'd also like for us to just think about, but we'll turn in a minute. And Louis, I want you to have the last word on this. If we think that there's a divine guide in the universe, God, and that we're beckoned in certain directions inwardly by God, is there ever a conflict between following a passion and being faithful to the bonds of relationship? Friends, family, so that there's really a tension. I can follow my passion, I can do that. Or I can be faithful to the bonds of these relationships. And I don't think I'll follow my passion. And if you think there's a conflict like that, you can also ask the question, well, what does God think? What's the beckoning of God? Is it to go for the passion or be faithful to the bonds of relationship? And I just want to say, I think many people experience that kind of tension in various circumstances. And it's just worth thinking about. Not that there's an easy solution, but it's a reality. With that, Louis, if you'd offer the last word on this, and we'll turn to the next one.
Yes, I absolutely loved the discussion. I think when I go back and I rewatch this in maybe a year or two, it's definitely everything everyone has said is definitely going to stick with me when I watch it. And I recommend maybe if you haven't seen it, going and watching it now with all of these questions and thoughts in your heart. But thank you for facilitating this, Jay. This has been I've really enjoyed this discussion on Free Solo. So I'm good to move on to the next one.
Well, thank you so much, Louis, for bringing it forth to us. And we will turn to the next one now. Louis, I think I'll let you show the trailer before I offer all my apologies.
You got it. All right.
This is not real. This is not real. This is not real. This isn't happening. Kate, tell me this isn't really happening.
I hear there's something you don't like the looks of.
We discovered a very large comet.
Oh, good for you.
It's headed directly towards Earth.
This comet is what we call a planet killer.
At this exact moment, I say we sit tight and assess.
Sit tight and assess?
Sit tight.
And then assess. The sit tight part comes first, and you got to digest it. That's the assessment period.
This is the worst news in the history of humanity. He just blew us off.
What are we gonna do? We have to release the information.
So we just leak it.
Our guests today have made a pretty big discovery in space.
How big is this thing, though? Like, can it destroy my ex-wife's house? Is that possible?
There's a 100% chance that we're all going to die.
Kate? Kate?
Hey.
Well, the handsome astronomer can come back anytime, but the yelling lady, not so
Not so much.
We're gonna get the news out there, one way or another.
It's real and it's coming. FBI! Jesus Christ, you could have just called me.
This comet contains $30 trillion worth of material.
What do trillions of dollars matter if we're all gonna die?
Oh, no, what if we're rich? That would be terrible.
You guys discovered a comet? I have a tattoo of a shooting star on my back.
Oh, that's terrific.
could be a complete disaster.
This is already a disaster.
You know that girl from live TV said we're all gonna die?
No.
Yo, bro! You'll never take me alive! There it is!
Giant comet hurtling its way towards Earth.
Can you see it?
I can't. My head is in a bag.
I did have the FBI put that bag over your head. They don't do that. The CIA does, but I made them do it.
You know, I had a feeling.
It's a good feeling because that is what I did and it was very funny and cool.
So I learned a lesson, and I'm still learning them in recommending this film. I had friends that had seen it and really liked it. I read an article in the New York Times by Russ Douthat, who said even though it's panned by the critics, he thought it had a point. I talked to a good friend who talked about how it had moved her. And on the basis of the trailer, I thought, I think I want to watch it and I think it might be good for us. And then as soon as I started watching it, I changed my mind. But it was too late. Now, ostensibly, the reason that I had reservations, and this is true, is I'm not all that comfortable with the F word. And like I told you, I have two sons, aged 30 and 33, and I said kiddingly, I'm sure they've never used the word.
Mm.
But I grow weary of it. I'm of a different generation. I'm not there. I'm not there. And so I'm not there with those modes of speech. And also, even though it was described as a dark comedy, I never laughed. For me, there was nothing funny about it. So I started thinking about you. And I think I am inviting you to watch this when I don't like it. And that's the lesson that I learned, and I don't think I'll do that again. And I think that any movie I recommend will be different. And here's the however. Here's the however. I actually did like the end of the film. And I don't know if you've seen it, but I liked the scene of the dinner together with the I'll call them real people, very homey, very natural. I liked the prayer, and I liked the fact that the young guy, the skater kind of guy, I liked the fact that he prayed. I really liked the fact that he prayed.
Yes.
And I liked the fact that the wife, you know, they said, what does amen mean? And she said something, I don't know. I don't know how to amen. And so they had kind of been honest about the religious vacuum in their life. I admired that. I thought it was kind of beautiful. And there was a line, I haven't watched it again, but where he said something, DiCaprio said something like, you know, this life, it's good. It's good. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's good. And I thought of the Hebrew Bible. And I thought of God declaring the earth is good. I think it's God recognizing that the earth is good. There's another side to the film that I really hope that we can talk about. And the people that I know that have liked this film, and this includes the producer apparently, think it's about global climate change. And the many, many ways in which life is, our lives and life itself is challenged, threatened by that reality. It's also threatened, challenged by the plethora of nuclear weapons across the planet. It's also challenged, threatened by the gross inequities between the haves and the have-nots. It's also threatened by the kind of wholesale assault that we're doing to other species in terms of species extinction on the planet. It's also threatened by the culture of consumerism foisted upon the whole world by the United States of America, which measures everything in terms of stuff and image, and which defines success as being popular. It's also threatened by what has happened to us vis-a-vis the media and the internet. And they all come together in my mind to truly present a deep challenge, not just to us as individuals, but to us as people and to other species too. So I was reminded of a saying often said of Jesus. I think it could be said of many a Jewish or Hebrew prophet, and I think it could likewise be said of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And it goes like this: He comforted the afflicted, and he afflicted the comfortable. Jesus comforted the afflicted, and he afflicted the comfortable. Prophet Muhammad comforted the afflicted and afflicted the comfortable. Isaiah, Hosea, Micah comforted the afflicted and afflicted the comfortable. And that's really what any prophet does. The prophetic tradition coming out of the Abrahamic strand, it presents these people who comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I see the purpose of this film, Don't Look Up, in part as an invitation to be afflicted, to so look, to recognize the pathology, the shallowness, the selfishness, the narcissism, the greed that permeates so much of life, American life. And so it's interesting that maybe a film can be prophetic too. Can be a context for presenting that side. So with that said, I wondered if we would talk a little bit. Yeah, Lynn, let me ask a question, then I'll ask you to speak, okay?
Yeah.
I think the question I would like for us to consider collectively and individually is, how important at this time in history and in our lives, how important is it that we not only seek comfort, but accept affliction, accept that side of things, and maybe get out of a notion of spirituality that's all about me, all about consolation, and move into a kind of spirituality that's about the real challenges of the world. All right, that's my question. Lynn, you go ahead. You're first.
Well, I don't know if this is answering your question, but I did not see the first film. But now that you're talking about the film that I did see, I'm seeing a connection between the two. And I'm not going to be articulating this as well as you just did, but standing on the edge of a cliff is kind of where we find ourselves now. And I think that was addressed in Don't Look Up. There was definitely narcissism in the first film. I know that goes against what the group was kind of talking about. And I didn't want to comment at the time because I hadn't seen the film. But if you're talking about the narcissism of American haves in this 21st century, I think the first film is a result of that. He basically did what he wanted to do for himself, and it didn't really matter a whole lot. It didn't stop him from doing it, that he was endangering other people's well-being. I think about people that put themselves into difficult situations like downhill skiers that disobey all the laws, that say, don't go here because there might be an avalanche, don't go there. And then they put people at risk who try to save them. And that just irritates me no end. So I don't see a spiritual thing there. I just see a very self-serving, well, I want to do it and you can't stop me. And I think that's what this film is all about. Don't Look Up. It's about, well, I have mine. I don't really care about what everybody else is going through. Some of us who live very nice lifestyles, and I would say myself included, are really gut-wrenched by what's going on with this climate denial, virus denial, all the things that are happening in our world that impact on people of all stratas of life. Doesn't seem to matter to some people who you can't tell me what to do. And I don't know how we get past that. I'm sorry for being Debbie Downer here, but I don't know where to go with that. I don't see anything spiritual in that movie. I see people trying to make things better, the two astronomers, and I see an unwillingness to listen to them by people who just don't want to move forward in a positive way. I'm done.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah.
Lynn, I think just one comment there. Sometimes apocalyptic thinking, you can kind of ask, how does apocalyptic literature, there's plenty of it in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament and the Quran. What's the function of apocalyptic literature? And at least one take on it is that its function is to wake us up.
Okay.
But you can't be awakened unless you are distressed first by the reality of the situation. You have to be distressed. And you can't keep your fingers crossed. It's like in Christianity, oh, I know Good Friday's coming, Easter's coming right after Good Friday, so I'll just go to the cross with my fingers crossed because I know good things happen next. No, you can't keep your fingers crossed. You have to really see the situation as it is. You have to be fully distressed. And then maybe a little light comes and you can wake up and help others do the same.
But what about the people who just throw it up and say, well, God will take care of it. God gave us a brain too.
Well, they have
Or
to wake up
somebody
too.
else will take care of it. I'm busy.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
Well, let's see what other comments we have. Carol, you want to say something? And Priscilla?
I want to say just the reverse of your experience with the movie. I didn't want to watch this movie. I had no desire to watch this movie, but Jay said to watch this movie. So I watched the movie. I'm a New Yorker. I'm not particularly bothered by the language. It's part of the culture. It's not my chosen language of prayer, but I understand the language. It's part of my original background. So I came to the movie as, a willing suspension of disbelief kind of, because you recommended the movie. But people I love and hold dear said it's an hour and a half that you're going to want back and don't bank on anything. And so it's just a reverse experience. And I was amazingly surprised. So I have to say that part of my surprise was I expected nothing. And I quickly got bought into the premise of the blindness of our culture on every level. And knowing that Meryl Streep, I have to say this too, knowing that Meryl Streep and DiCaprio were violently opposed to some of the goings on during the past administration added a depth for me in terms of what they might be combating in terms of the blindness of people. As a literary device, sometimes you use the not, don't, or not to call attention to what is. So you're calling it apocalyptic. I would say a way of waking a person's consciousness. So using the don't often calls attention to what is in a way that we seem unable to see it because the media has become so warped, because our attitude toward nature has become so unbalanced. So how do you call attention to that? Through the most extreme possibility and using the negative language, not the language you meant, but I mean the not, the presence of don't, because it's a way of getting us out of our own blindness. So I want to thank you for making the movie available to us, despite all of because I think it made us wrestle with what we're willing to look at and what we're not willing to look at, and how we wish it would go away, and how, all the wishing in the world. The end of the film was really precisely, this is what we have. What is it worth? I also thought of the biblical, and it was good. And to recognize life as good, and insofar as we have control, to act upon that good, to preserve it. So I think it was a deeply spiritual film, despite my hesitations. Thank you.
On stack, we've got Priscilla, Tina, and then Sheila.
No, not me.
Okay, then I've got Tina and then Sheila.
I wanted to address the dark humor. I liked the film, and it may be because I grew up in a family with an alcoholic father, and in discussion with my siblings away from my dad, and particularly during his dying experience and subsequently, we talked about things that someone who was not in that kind of family of origin wouldn't think was funny, but that we did because it was a type of comic relief. That sounds kind of strange. I'm going to just give one brief example. I was at their home once. This was many years ago. Both my parents are deceased, but we were in the kitchen, and Dad reached above the range in a tall cabinet to get some hot sauce. He loved that Louisiana type hot sauce. He was born in Louisiana anyway. He fumbled the bottle, and it was a full bottle, and it dropped, and it fell on the kitchen floor and, shattered into all kinds of fragments of not only the glass, but the hot sauce. And I remember Mother was talking to him as if he were a child. I think he was barefoot at the time, and she scolded him about not having on any slippers or anything like that, and about being drunk, which apparently he was, and sent him back to the bedroom. And I remember years later in an Al-Anon meeting, I was discussing that, or I mentioned it, and I was talking about kind of the dark humor of it. And for many people, this would not be funny. But for me, to relate this story in a comical way was, I said, I'll never forget the time I was at home and Dad was sauced in a pool of hot sauce on the floor. Well, that's not really funny, but you'd be amazed how many people laughed with me, because dark humor is a way of comic relief. At least it has been in my history, and I certainly don't expect that to be the history of other people. But I liked the movie. I liked the dark humor. I could relate to it. And at the same time, I agree with everything that Rose said. I think, it was such a statement. To me, it was an in-your-face reality. Like, let's get real, people. This is a threat that could destroy the whole world. Aren't you even a little bit concerned? And that's all I have to say. I really liked the movie, and I really do think, like Rose said, that it had a very spiritual quality, despite the language and despite the dark humor. I mean, I ate it up, and I'm sure that's probably not, consistent with a lot of other people, but I think it also depends on your personal perspective and how you've lived your life. Thanks.
Ina, thanks. And I appreciate it. And you give us an image to name our society, that we may all be sauced a little bit and lying on the floor with glass from the hot sauce, and we don't even know it, or we won't acknowledge it. So thanks for that image. Sheila, I'm watching the clock, so it's about,
It's fine. Tina pretty much covered what I was going to say. I loved it too. The same way I love Dr. Strangelove when it comes to the nuclear thing.
Oh, yeah.
So it was similar to me.
Great. Sophia, thank you, everybody. Oh, Louis, go ahead.
Louis, can you make an invitation for others to join us in presenting the movies before we close?
Absolutely. I would like to invite everyone to think, deeply about a movie they would really like to share with the class, because right now we've only got one other movie that's on the schedule, and you don't want me to just put rock climbing documentaries on for every week. So if you could email me, if you could meditate on it, maybe tonight and tomorrow, and think about a movie that you would really like to share. Dr. McDaniel is going to share a movie every week, but we still need one to fill in the gap during every week. Please do email me at theinterfaithcenter@gmail.com. I will put you on the schedule, and I'll confirm with you, and we can talk about anything that you want to talk about as far as your discussion questions. We can get Jay looped in with us. So please, I'd love some movies in my inbox to put on the schedule. Thank you very much. And I can go ahead and put that email in the chat as well as we wrap up.
Thank you, Lois, very much. Thank you, Lois and Jay, both for bringing these two beautiful and I think very creative movies to our class today. Creativity is a gift of God. And when we engage with our creative potential and bring it out in these beautiful forms, according to Brussels, who are one of our sponsors, that is our gift back to the God. So I am really thankful for both these movies. I want to end with this quote today. I do believe that our universe is made up of stories. And I want to use this quote from the Russett's book about stories and close our class today using it as a prayer. So it's a quote by Madeline Engel, and Madeline says, "Why does anybody tell a story? It does indeed have something to do with faith. Faith that the universe has meaning, that our lives have meaning, faith that our little human existence is not irrelevant, that what we choose to say or do matters, and it matters cosmically." So with that said, with a universe full of stories, I leave you all with salam, peace, and shalom. See you all next Wednesday.